It's 2021, and the sequel trilogy has come and gone.
Rey Skywalker.
For better or worse, the films are now Star Wars history. Few films have inspired such polarized reactions, and thousands of hours of sequel criticism have been produced over the past half-decade. While I'm not using this video to debate the merits of the sequel trilogy, I am going to argue that one key plot element was intentionally omitted relatively late in the production of the trilogy and hastily buried, resulting in a huge gap in its story and characters. A plot element which would have altered the Star Wars universe forever. One of the most common criticisms of the sequel trilogy is that it is a lazy rehash of the original trilogy, recycling similar plot points for the sake of cheap nostalgia. In The Force Awakens, this is readily apparent, as the film follows A New Hope almost beat for beat. However, for the rest of the trilogy, this gets muddier. Some plot elements in The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker are similar to those in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, but to brand them a rehash isn't completely accurate. Notably, the sequels are missing a big reveal, the kind that would define the entire trilogy the way I Am Your Father changed cinema. Now, you might be thinking that the sequel trilogy did prepare us for a big reveal.
Do you want to know the truth about your parents? Or have you always known?
They were nobody.
They were filthy junk traders who sold you off for drinking money.
While this is definitely a key reveal, it isn't of the same magnitude as I Am Your Father. It seems like an unresolved plot thread because it is an unresolved plot thread, and is not the only storyline that the sequel trilogy doesn't resolve. We are never given a clear explanation for why Ben Solo joined the dark side. Luke considers killing his nephew because he sees the darkness within him, doesn't finish the job, and then Ben Solo becomes Kylo Ren. But why? Did he turn evil because Luke tried to kill him, or did Luke try to kill him because he was going to turn evil? A chicken or the egg scenario doesn't make sense for something as glossed over as this, but a more shocking discovery about Kylo Ren would make his fall and Luke's attempt at murder suddenly make a lot more sense. It would be, dare I say it, fantastic storytelling by directors J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson. The rabbit hole goes deeper. In The Force Awakens, we learn that Han Solo left Leia following Ben's fall to the dark side. This raises so many questions. Why would Han abandon Leia, the love of his life, during such a hard time? Why would Han abandon Ben, his own flesh and blood, to darkness? Why would Han go back to smuggling? What if Leia turned out to not be the love of Han's life he thought she was? What if Han wasn't abandoning his own flesh and blood? What if smuggling was the only way to reclaim something that his greatest rival had not taken from him? These questions have a simple answer. Kylo Ren's father is Jabba the Hutt.
No. It's not true. That's impossible!
The explanation is simple. While Jabba's prisoner on Tatooine, Leia had a moment of weakness and gave herself to the powerful Hutt crime lord. Perhaps it was even the will of the Force that the two should know each other in the biblical sense and conceive a child. Her choking him to death could be retconned to have been some kind of kink that Jabba was into. Because even with her lover dead, Leia would always have someone to remember him by. This plot point isn't meant to be crude or gross, and certainly isn't intended to generate the kind of fetish material found in the darkest corners of the internet. Interspecies romance has already been introduced as an element of the Star Wars universe, beginning with The Force Awakens, where 2 scenes hint at these potential relationships.
Where's my boyfriend?
Chewie's working on the Falcon.
I like that Wookiee.
That sounds very scary. You must be so brave.
Nothing really is meant to come of interactions like these, but they do shift the audience's expectations just enough to conceive of a human-Hutt romantic connection. Thematically, this fits Kylo's story arc quite well.
Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
Rather than spouting off empty words for the trailers and marketing material, Kylo is crying for help as he grapples with his very origins. He's a man who, upon learning of his true parentage, rejected his past, his birthright, and his family's teachings of the Force. Kylo Ren is now a tragic figure, and has a reason to be an angsty mess beyond Disney wanting to sell merchandise at Hot Topic. This also allows for a richer thematic contrast between Kylo Ren and Rey, as alluded to earlier. Kylo wishes his parents were no one, which fuels both his antagonism and his admiration towards Rey. Meanwhile, both Rey and Kylo are descended from villains that were thought to have died in the final chapter of the previous trilogy.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Like the Lucas dialogue of old, this line is overly literal, but allows for a clear contrast. Despite the improbable romance between the Princess of Alderaan and the Hutt of Tatooine, somehow Jabba returned.
No one's ever really gone.
Supreme Leader Snoke, rather than being a pointless rehash of Emperor Palpatine, would have been the mastermind who successfully put a wedge in the Skywalker family. Snoke almost certainly played a role in breaking Leia's secret to Han, Luke, and Ben. How he would know about Kylo's true parentage is anyone's guess, but he was a powerful dark side user who could read minds. And besides, Hutt genes can reveal themselves in unexpected ways. In the final chapter of the trilogy, Kylo's conflicts with Han and Leia would be resolved. Isn't the scene of Kylo hallucinating Han's spirit much more meaningful if it is not only his atonement for Han's murder, but also his acceptance that Han, as the man who raised him, was his true father? And I'm certain that were it not for Carrie Fisher's early passing, she would have been fantastic in a scene where Kylo came to accept his mother's love, despite her indiscretions. The evidence is clear that in earlier drafts of the sequel trilogy, Jabba the Hutt was intended to be revealed as Kylo Ren's true father. So, why didn't Disney go through with this?
I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
Well, it's obvious that a human-Hutt romance would be divisive, and we're dealing with a company whose entire business model involves churning out crowd-pleasing, high-budget fanfiction. But this was the plan as late as pre-production for The Last Jedi, whose script is widely speculated to have been shuffled around, most likely to account for this subplot being struck down. Rian Johnson wanted to make a bold, subversive film, but was handicapped by producer Kathleen Kennedy, who twisted his arm into making the nonsensical, dramatically inert sequel we got. Abrams continued the story he and Johnson set out to tell, but without that connective tissue of Jabba and Leia's relationship to drive the story, it was a similar jumbled mess. The threads are all there for a huge reveal that would rejuvenate the Star Wars franchise and push the characters to their limits, but nothing to tie it all together. The passion of Jabba and Leia would have delivered us the thematically rich, subversive sequel trilogy we hoped we would get when it was announced almost a decade ago. Instead, the sequel trilogy languishes in Dante's Inferno, forever doomed to its current malformed state.
If you were given the opportunity to swap roles with anybody in the Star Wars film franchise, who would you pick and why?
Oh,
Yeah, that's a good question. It's hard to answer on the fly.
Everyone so far, or almost everyone, has said you.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, it has to be someone within
No,
this,
you could, any film you want.
probably Jabba the Hutt.